Hey, welcome to Relatable Relationships Unfiltered. Today I'm hanging out with Sid Jackson, mental health advocate and author, to chat all about how our mental health shows up in our relationships. This is Relatable Relationships Unfiltered. Sid, welcome to our show. I am highly entertained by your content. Please tell us how you got into this space and where all of those ideas come from for you.
Well, first off, how you doing? I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
and regarding my content, full transparency, I'm actually telling on myself. Just like, and so what it is I give it off almost on a third person's perspective, and then I sort of throw the smile, the dimples, the clothes behind it to capture your attention. But I'm going to give you something that's educational, relatable, or humorous.
Sure.
And as you see the comments, the engagements, I just like to sort of nudge people to get them to just look deeper into themselves, not take themselves so serious, but also in the same breath, be transparent about your bullshit.
Right,
And
yeah.
literally all I want to do is just show the world that it's okay to not be okay, but ultimately being a human, how can I say it, a mental health humorist.
Yeah. Yes. And that is our mission here at Relatable, is that we are all human, each and every one of us, no matter what we do for a living. And you had one the other day about parenting. You're realizing you're parenting the kid that is you. And I'm like, oh shit. Yep. No, that's me. My ex always laughs. He's like, you wanted a funny kid. This is your fault that he's such a smart ass. And I'm like, I
Yes,
know.
yes,
So
absolutely.
yes. How did you get into doing what you do? Is your full-time career in mental health or
No, I'm glad you asked that. I'm actually by day, I'm a human resource executive and operations director. I'm also a business consultant. How I tapped into the mental health space is because, I'm the full transparency, in 2017, I hit my wits end. I was making the most money in the world at that time. Some of my vices was taking over my life, and I was just miserable, from the money I made to the house to where I was living. Going outside, I just felt like the world was attacking me. But according to the world and based off the image, this is the perfect life. Enough was enough. And again, if I'm going to really dive deep and be true to who I am, 2017, I survived a suicide,
mm,
and it changed the dynamics, the trajectory of my life. I can go deeper and deeper if you're ready for it, but
sure.
ultimately, uh, life just started lying, and it got overly heavy for me. And enough was enough. And outside of being numb to what I was feeling, outside of feeling like I had no one to talk to, even though I have all these friends and family to talk to, it just felt like nobody was understanding what I was actually feeling.
Mm,
And again, enough was enough. I bought a new car, I had a custom suit, and I literally just wanted to. I just wanted to end the pain. I wanted to end the internal suffering, and it didn't work. It didn't work. But there was a moment in my life where I felt literally God. You know how people say, "Oh, Jesus, take the wheel. Jesus, take the wheel." I literally felt like He did it,
mm,
and I literally stopped what I was doing, and I stopped to pray, and I just screamed and I cried, and I felt like I was going through this for other people. I needed to go through this to first to change my mindset and how I was feeling about myself. I was being too hard on myself. I wasn't being curious. I wasn't giving myself grace. But I needed to go through this for it to build the character of the man that I am today.
right.
So I decided to do something about it, and that was heal. And the funny thing about my version of healing, I went to the doctor first. But when I say doctor, how many times have you been sick or something didn't feel right and you went to Google like WebMD?
Oh, sure, of course.
Now, if you know anything about WebMD, you could have a headache and it'll say, oh, your leg's about to fall off, right?
Yep.
But I did that, and I started to identify new words, new vocabulary like depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar. And then I started to Google, going back to the doctor. I went back to Dr. Google to find, I didn't know what the words was at the time, therapists, clinicians, that type of stuff. And then I
Sure.
realized none of them looked like me. And then I
Mm,
realized, what do I do? Because at that point in my life, I was so scared of just life that I needed someone to relate. Then I
yeah,
started my therapy. And again, I tell people this all the time. Therapy is a lot like dating. It's
absolutely.
not it's not a one size fit all. And chances are you're going to probably have to go on one or two, maybe three or four dates before you find someone who you feel vulnerable with to truly open up. And
Yeah.
then from there, from 2017 into today, I decided to not just live my life for work, but I wanted to live my life doing purpose work. And that's
Mm.
using my story as someone else's roadmap. And that's why what you see on my page where I say I'm telling on myself, those are my journal inserts. I just
Ah,
add humor to it.
yeah. No, I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that and for your vulnerability and transparency in that experience. I really do think that is so relatable for a lot of people in terms of living. And my clients say it all the time. Like, what do I have to complain about? Why would I be depressed? I have the job, I have the family, I have the beautiful girlfriend, I have all the things. What do I have to be depressed about? And I really appreciate your transparency in that you can have all those things and you can still have anxiety and depression and PTSD and unresolved trauma, and the list goes on, that and those things don't give a fuck what
Not,
your salary is. If you're living with
absolutely.
PTSD, yeah. So I appreciate that. That's
No,
a
yeah, no
powerful
problem.
message.
Thank you for allowing me to share that. And again, I, I literally use my social media as a tool to get into people's minds, into their heads, into their homes. Again, when we walk outside this door, I'm sorry, that's my front door. When we walk outside the door, many of us, I just felt like I had to put on this mask of somebody who I wasn't and was on the inside. And I got tired, I got heavy, I got tired of crying, I got tired of complaining, I got tired of people just not understanding what I'm going through. So you know what
Mhm.
I need to do? I need to remove myself out of the situation. But again, thank God he put me in that position to finally hear him.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you in a relationship when all that was happening?
I was. And she was trying, but now that I'm a little bit more mature, shared trauma is not a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as I was battling, she was battling, and I couldn't help her. She couldn't help me. She's adding more to my baggage, whether it was money, whether it was intimacy, whether it was her children, whether it was the bills. It was just becoming too much. So if you take money off the table, what we got, love wasn't enough. So that
Mhm.
relationship, I don't want to necessarily call it toxic, but sometimes rejection is your blessing.
Right.
And that's what it ended up being for me.
And so had you guys broken up prior to the event that took place, or was that part of your healing process, was recognizing, okay, some things have got to go? Or, I mean, as much as
Yes,
you're comfortable sharing with that.
yeah, we broke up prior to that because I'm gonna be very honest with you. The intimacy stopped. I wasn't
Mm,
myself. I was young, but I still just wasn't in the mood. And then
yeah.
everything started to bother me, from being in the house to me hearing certain noises to certain things that she would say to me that at the time I didn't realize they were triggers. But
Mm,
I would snap. I would talk to her in a way that I would not want someone to talk to my child or to my mother. And
right.
I, we just became roommates at that time, and then enough was enough. I asked her to move out. She didn't. So I ended up moving out, leaving her the place. And that's when I believe I started to identify what was wrong with me, or identify that I actually needed the help.
Yeah. Yeah. What your role was in that situation. How how do you see, and I mean, you just described quite a bit of it, but how your mental health impacted that dynamic? So it sounds like kind of feeling irritable or getting triggered easily. Like, when you reflect back, what was the impact of those unresolved mental health struggles on your relationship?
It affected my ability to fulfill certain roles and responsibilities within my relationship. It led to shifts in the division of our labor, or necessities and flexibility of understanding how to approach each other.
Mm,
It affected how I responded to her, or my receptiveness. I've identified that it wasn't love, it was more tolerance.
Right.
And ultimately, I realized that if I don't love myself, there's no way I can pour into loving someone else. I was truly pouring from an empty cup, but still playing house, saying, you know what, I'll be fine. Oh, it'll be okay. Oh, this will pass. And
Yeah.
it was the blind leading the blind, and we were bound for destruction. And then ultimately it became a little bit physical. She started to put her hands on me because of how I was communicating with her. And
Mm.
now that I'm older and I've done and I continue to do some of the personal and self-development work, it was verbally abusive. I was speaking to her in a manner in which, again, it was unacceptable. And now that I take full accountability for it, I found she found grace to see my evolution, see what I'm doing now. She accepted my apology. So deep down, I feel great now, you know. But back then, it was some of the darkest and some of the darkest moments and days of my life. And if I have someone next to me who I see every single day, and this person's presence now become a trigger, before things got entirely too out of hand, it was just best that we separated.
And I think that's something that people don't talk about enough is the impact of, first of all, that you are drawn to people who trigger you, which is the
Yes.
really screwed up part. So your programming makes that what's familiar you're drawn to. And so you end up with somebody who you guys, you might trigger them and then their reaction triggers you. And then you just get in the trigger cycle together.
That's right.
And a lot of that coming from, so I know for me, like, I talk very openly about my struggles with anxiety and depression and CPTSD and all of those things. And I know for me that comes up in my relationships. Like if I'm in a depressive episode, like I'm
Mm.
isolated, I'm shut down, like I'm not able to show up in the way that I know that they need, or in the way that I'm creating all this content, like that I know that any partner would need. And that's really hard, like to
Yeah,
know, like to have that awareness, but that your
that's
mental
correct.
health can really prevent you from being what you want to be. And so I think that that's not talked about or normalized nearly enough, that it's not, when a relationship struggles, it's not just because one person's being an asshole or one person's a victim or something like that. A lot of times it is rooted in mental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of those childhood triggers start to resurface because again, you weren't able to identify first the language, followed by what your triggers were. And even though I realized, okay, I don't like this because it makes me feel this, I've quickly learned that these was triggers that I just never addressed. I never poured into fixing or addressing. Therefore, it shows up this way. And that's where the toxicity or the toxic masculinity started to present itself. And guess who was the face of it?
Yeah,
It
let's
wasn't a
let's
good
talk
look.
about that. Let's talk about these gender differences in terms
Yeah.
of, especially, how do you define that toxic masculinity? What would be your definition of that?
So again, toxic masculinity, in my personal opinion, again, it's I don't want to call it vague. I don't think it's a one size fit all, and I think it transforms and it's differently. Uh, Certain principles, morals, or a lack of integrity. But for instance, one of the things I used to believe. I'm a man. I'm the one with the penis. You do this, I do this. I make the money, you cook. You clean, I take out the trash. I do this, you deal with the kids. And that's toxic because my partner, that's not how she was raised. She was
Mm,
actually raised with both parents. I was raised with a single, strong, Black, independent mother who
yeah.
ended up raising a man. She was raised with a strong, Black, supportive mother who's a wife and a father who's a provider, protector, who professed and was always there. So what started to show was she was raised a certain way to be a mother, to be a wife, to be a queen, to lead from behind.
Mm.
I was raised to say, listen to me.
So what did
This
that
is
look
what's
like?
going to my way or no way. And
Mm.
it was ugly. We got into arguments. Why my food ain't cooked? Why I gotta do this? Why the laundry isn't done? Make the bed. Why the kids screaming? And then as I continued to evolve, I started to realize, Sid, you've been single all your life. You lived by yourself since 16. Even though the society called, oh, doing domestic work, This is normal. You cook, you clean, you iron, you pick up, you cut the grass, you do all that without a partner. But now you got someone who's trying to sew into you. This is your opportunity to lead. And when it comes to this whole, back to the whole toxic masculinity, I wanted to deface it, because again, relationships are not a one size fit all. And I know it's not a cookie cutter. I needed to identify what worked for me or what worked for us. I don't mind sharing chores. I don't mind taking the kids to play sports or school or after school activities. I don't mind cooking, cleaning, and doing laundry. However, I felt at that time, because I had a woman, I ain't got to do any of that no more. It's your job. And it showed up through combativeness, to aggression, through verbal abuse, to button up the heads, to a lack of intimacy, to poor communication, to me not identifying when I'm setting a boundary or when I'm putting up a wall. I had to truly identify the difference between boundaries and walls, and not also realizing all these walls I'm putting up because I don't want this to happen. That same wall is stopping this young lady from loving me correctly.
Right. Which is one of the most profound aspects of the walls and the boundaries getting so misused and misunderstood. And really even the concept of the boundary, and then people feeling so self-righteous in, well, I'm setting a boundary so I can do this, that, or the other. But where did your awareness come in? Like, what was this part of your therapy journey that you like recognized, like, oh shit, no, I'm kind of being a dick. Like, I got to check myself. Maybe your therapist didn't say it quite like that.
She did it, but so many words. And the thing is, going back to the whole toxic masculinity, I wasn't trying to hear what she had to say because she was a woman. And again, it's not that I didn't respect women. You know, I have 5 sisters and a single mom and a ton of aunts, right? But I just thought I was right because I was a man. And my therapist said, Sid, you know what? I'm not getting through to you. So she taught me the technique about journaling. And that changed my perspective about my mental health. And now my approach to mental health is look it directly in the mirror, face the ugly. It might feel like hell, but why stop? Keep going through. And it's not about the destination. The destination continues to evolve. It's the journey to get to where you need it to be. So when I started to journal, she taught me this technique of, Sid, no matter what you think, write it down every day. Every day, every day. And I don't want you to reread it. I want you to come back to what you wrote 7 days from the day you wrote it.
Oh, interesting.
Wow. And a very interesting technique. And what it did for me, I started to realize that Sunday, when I started to document my experiences, I was pissed off. She did this. I can't believe it. Monday, I'm still pissed off. I'm not touching her. I want to sleep in another room. Tuesday, I'm upset, but I'm going to go take the kids to go play basketball and we're going to eat out. Wednesday, you know what? Work was a good day. I'm going to hang out with my boys. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I started to change that emotion I had this past Sunday. Now, when I went back the following Sunday to reread what I wrote, it was dark. It was ugly. But one of the things it did for me, as you saw how the days changed, I wrote my own blueprint to what the emotion was, and not necessarily the steps, but the roadmap to get me out of that emotion. Now that I'm able to be the narrator of my own story, no matter how ugly it was, I may not be able to tell you the truth, Liz, or my partner, or my mother, or my brother, but I can't lie to myself. Now, when I was able to take that mirror and I realized, oh shit, this ain't what I want to represent. This little girl, my daughter, she's watching me. I'm teaching her what's acceptable from a man. That bothered me. And then my therapist told me, Sid, would you allow your daughter to date you? And I said, wow. Because I said, hell no, you know? And that's when the journey started.
So when you could see later in the week, like when you saw, okay, I started to feel better when I did this, when I took the kids to go to dinner, when I was hanging out with my friends or whatever, are you saying that you were able to then say, kind of see what pulled you out of it, so then you could start that sooner, or you could put more of your focus on those things that felt safe, that felt light, that there were
Yes.
things you enjoyed?
Yes, yes, and
Okay.
it was things I enjoyed that just didn't involve me and my
Yeah.
four walls.
Right.
I started to realize that this journey isn't meant, even though my journey is my journey, part of this journey is to pick up and get assistance from things and people that you love. At that time, I was just in my own way and I just wasn't ready to accept it. I just wasn't
Right.
providing proper communication. I lacked the emotional intimacy. The empathy and understanding just wasn't there. There was so much stress and a lack of conflict management, or I didn't know how to de escalate from myself at that time. And
Right.
vitamin D, that sun, getting outside and just breathing, learning to meditate and sometimes stretch, play basketball, go smoke a cigar, have some wine with your friends. That worked for me, but I had to stay busy. Even though that was a band aid at that time before I started the healing journey, it worked.
Yeah. Yeah. Where would you say that the programming for that toxic masculinity came from? So with a single mom, did it feel like she like kind of instilled that manliness? You get what I mean by that dominance, or was it role models that you had? Like, where do you think that? Because it sounds like, I mean, you were pretty set in your ways of what these gender roles should be. Where did that come from
Yes.
for you?
How I was raised, I won't necessarily just put it on my mother, but my mother raised us to be strong. I
Yeah.
watched my mother do it all herself. She raised me, my brother, and my five sisters by herself. My mother was a strong, independent Black woman who took no shit. So she
Yeah.
taught us, don't take nobody shit.
Right. Right.
The
So
more, yeah, like we don't do tears. Uh, what's wrong? Mental health, man, get the hell out of here. I didn't raise you like that. Go and as a child, I was a little bit huskier, right? And my mother told me, get your fat ass outside and go run. That's the communication style we had. But what I know now, she was trying her best. This
of
is what
course.
she knew. And then when I went outside, my influences were all negative, but this is the environment that I'm around, from the projects to being in the hood to seeing homicides, suicides, drug vials everywhere to overdose. This is my norm. This is regular. So if I don't see it, what the hell is all this? Then I also had no one to talk to because again, my role models was the people who I know now I should have stayed away from. They're selling drugs, they're robbing, they're stealing, they're doing all the things that I would not have want for my child. So without unpacking that as you grow up, that helps build your identity. I was a sum total of all of my experience, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And then it comes out in the way that it comes out, and not always the greatest way. And as you're describing that overwhelming depression, I mean, that is really what happens when that amount of trauma, when any amount of trauma compounds, but when that amount of unprocessed trauma is just building, building, building. And I think what people really struggle with is then they get in a relationship and they don't get why it's not working, especially as you described, when you have the income and you have the home and the family, and what's wrong with me? Why can't I get this to work? Why can't I figure this out? Which really just makes all of that anxiety and depression that much worse. And
Absolutely.
if you don't have the language and you don't have the role modeling and you don't have the template, you have no idea what to do with it. So, I mean, that's huge
Absolutely.
when obviously seeking out therapy to start that process. How did your family, or how does your family even present day, receive your mental health journey and receive how you, not kind of, how you do advocate for it on such a platform?
Uh, it was a little bit of a struggle. A few years ago, it's funny, I'm about to share this with you. I remember when I went to the doctor, Dr. Google, right? And I started to tell my mother, Ma, I Googled this and this says depression, and depression seems and feels like this. And I have anxiety because my anxious this. And when you scream out, it makes you feel like this. My mom said, get the hell out of here, Sid. I didn't raise you to be like that. And she walked off.
Mm.
And that hurt me to the core. the first person I grew to love rejected me as a man with how I feel. I'm being open, honest, and transparent to this one person who I've learned to love. And with her rejection, I stopped speaking to my mother for some time, and then I started to spiral. Bring it to today. We had to separate, but as they've watched my journey, they watched my life matriculate from the decisions I make when no one's watching, to the decisions I make where it doesn't affect anyone, to how I started to take better care of myself, how public I became about what I was going through. And then when I started to receive an outpour from hundreds of thousands of strangers, they started to realize, hold on. Then it started with my little sister who texted me, said, Sid, I feel the same way. And then
Oh,
there was conversations happening with my mother. Then there was more conversations happening with my brother, happening with my uncle. And then my mother had a conversation with me and said, Sid, you remember what you was telling me? I've been going through that my whole life. She didn't, I won't say the resources, but she wasn't prepared to have the in-depth conversation because again, hurt people hurt people. And I believe my mother has experienced some childhood trauma that she just may not be ready to embrace or heal from. But one of the
mhm.
things my therapist said, Sid, your problem is you're looking for an apology from your mother when in all actuality, you may not get it. But part of your healing journey is being okay with that. Accept people for who they are as opposed to who you want them to be. But I was like, no, but this is my mother. I'm in my 30s and I'm still looking for my mother's pat on the back or my mother to say, Sid, you did the right job. But coming to today, they see all the lives that I'm impacting. They saw the book that I wrote. They see me on the news. They see me on social media. They're laughing. But when I come back to New York, where I'm from, they see how people embrace me. They see the paraphernalia, and my conversation is different.
Right.
All of our conversations, it's still fluid where we talk all types of crap, etc. But now our conversations are centered in love. It's
Yeah.
centered in with intention. Why? Because again, part of me still is a little sensitive because of what happened in the past, but I finally accepted my mother for who she was. And again, that's my mother who tried her best. And even
Right.
though she may not verbalize it, there's still some trauma within that heart that I see
Sure.
glimpses of trying to come out. So what I do now is I give a simple nudge. Hey mom, what you think about this? And that opens up dialogue that we weren't fair to have 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah, holding space for that and that you can recognize the hurt that was caused and that she was doing her best and she's also really living in her own unprocessed trauma and even for her to say like I've been living with that my whole life, there's a good chance she just that's how life feels, right? Like not
Yeah.
even realizing that that is not ideal or that it could be different. I think it's really powerful that even more than all of the thousands of lives that you reach on a daily basis, the intergenerational trauma that you are
Mm.
shifting in your own family, like that's huge to be able
Yes.
to be that person to just shift the trajectory of your, your last name. Like that just looks different. I'm sure that feels well, I guess let me ask, how does that feel for you?
It
Let me
feels
throw a therapist question your direction.
yeah. It feels amazing because I can, it's their buzzwords, but I can honestly say that it's a strong possibility that generational trauma can stop with me.
Yeah.
I feel, I feel it's every man's dream to buy their mother a house, right? But instead of a house, what if you can change how your family thinks,
Mm,
how we receive the bullshit we went through, then the bullshit they went through? She learned it from somebody, but it stops with this man. Then it
right.
goes to my daughter, then her children, and then her children, and then her children. And I can honestly say at some point, grandpa did that.
Yeah. Yeah. Which that is for me what is so important with the work that I do. And I'm so blessed that with my clients or with my community on Instagram, all of those things. But that I was able to create a different template for my son that's all I care about really
Mm,
at the end of the day in that way. That's the most powerful thing that I care about, is that he will now know how to love his partner in a way
right.
that I had no concept of. And he will know what love feels like. He will know how to be loved, which is the other half of the problem. It's not just how we show up shitty in relationships, but it's that we allow people to treat us shitty as well because of
That's right.
what we don't know. So tell me, currently, then, are you dating? Are you in a relationship? Are you, how has your mental health journey shifted that for you currently?
Uh, I'm gonna be honest, it's still an everyday process, and I'm still learning more about myself. I am currently dating, and one of the things she has helped me identify is that I do have new triggers. One of the things I love, one of my favorite quotes from Steve Harvey is, "Every new level requires a new devil," and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I can feel when it's attacking. However, I now have identified ways to cope, not just to exist, but to cope and heal from it. One of those is simply operating in silence. And then having a partner who truly understands what you're going through, because in the beginning you were open and honest about your story, your testimony, and what it is that you experience.
Right.
I met her after I started this journey, and part of the social media presence, it brought on some real honest conversation between us. And it was so eye-opening and so relieving to have someone who understood, but did more listening than they did talking. And now
Mm.
all the questions are for clarity and learning how to operate in the space when I'm having an episode. Now,
So had sh
it's
oh,
not perfect though. It's not perfect. I still have my outbursts. However, this amazing woman she now approaches me with grace. She starts it curious, and I can see when it's becoming too heavy, but I'll just remove myself and then come back. Completely bipolar, but she still embraces me with open arms. I know, right? Embraces me with open arms. She embraces me with open arms, and then when I'm ready, she allows me to offload and listen, as opposed to saying no, 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 no. And then with the proper time, she tells me how it affects her.
mm. Yeah, and has she done her own mental health journey then as well, or she's in her journey currently?
Yes, one of my requirements to date me is you must also work on your mental health. I don't want to hear, "Oh, I'm fine." No, I'm fine. It's either you're going to do individual counseling and couples counseling. We haven't got there yet, but
Mhm.
doing your individual work is a requirement to date me.
So what would you tell people, so that's a good one to add to this list. What would you tell people who are trying to, whether it's that they're trying to break intergenerational trauma, whether they've had mental health struggles and they're trying to show up different in their relationship, what are some things that you would suggest that they start doing in addition to therapy kind of being the foundation for that, but to be able to show up differently for their partner, or if they're dating, to, attract somebody different?
Start curious. Give not just your partner, but also give yourself grace. And also remember that every relationship is unique, and the impact of mental health can vary widely based off the relationship and what each of you have gone through individually. But I think the key to fostering this is open dialogue, transparent communication, having empathy, and having the willingness to support one another while you're going through your ups and downs. But when you find the right mate, make sure that it's not just someone who's good for your image, someone who's good for your spirit,
Right.
someone who just isn't using terms like anxiety, depression, and all that stuff as buzzwords, but someone who may actually champion some of this stuff and then has the grace to deal with someone who has these everyday struggles. None of us are perfect, but what makes us better is the individuals who's, again, looking in the mirror,
Yeah.
attacking that beast and facing the ugly, but also doing the work. I can respect someone who don't have it together, but I can see them doing the work. What I can't get with is someone who think, "No, nothing's wrong with me. I ain't got no trauma. I don't have any of that." Okay, let's see how it shows up.
Right. Right. I say that all of the time, that you are not going to find, we all have something. We all have red flags. We all have toxic behaviors. We all have something. But what you should look for is not the unicorn, but rather the person with the self-awareness, the person who is
Yes.
willing to look in the mirror, because there's a lot of
Yes.
people who won't even, let alone say something is wrong. They're not even going to look. And so that being the first piece, but then I love how you add that second piece, because it's so important that all the self-awareness in the world isn't going to get you anywhere if you're not doing something about it. So what are those
Absolutely.
efforts you're putting in towards change? What is the hard work that you're doing to show up differently? And I
Yeah.
believe that that's the key difference, because every relationship is going to have conflict. It's going to have its ups and downs. But if you both are committed to
Mhm.
putting in efforts towards change, that's the game changer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
All right, Sid. Well, where can people find you on your platforms and online and all those things?
You guys can find me on all social media handles. Let's start with Instagram, Facebook, my website, even on Threads now at TheTheeThe Sid Jackson at Instagram on all social media platforms. Or again, you can go directly to my website at TheSafePlace.com. You can also try TheSidJackson.com, where you can stay up to date on everything happening mental health, therapy related, humor, or any and everything that got going on. I travel the country creating safe places for people who look, think, and feel like me. And I like to consider myself a convener. I like to connect the dots, connecting people to people and the resources. So please allow me to be a resource for you. And again, I check all my DMs and all my emails. Yes, I do it. So again, guys, you can find me everywhere.
Well, thank you again, Sid. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your vulnerability today and just your honest message, which is what we need to hear. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Liz. This was amazing. And I love your
Abs-
work. I just want to give you some more kudos. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you all for hanging out on Relatable Relationships Unfiltered. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, sign up for my newsletter, and find me on Instagram at Dr. Elizabeth Fedrick.